The shifting winds and strong currents of Long Island Sound have trained generations of America's finest sailing talent. Many Olympic and America's Cup sailors had their origins in these testing waters. The Vineyard Race, which was inaugurated in 1932, has always been considered one of the most competitive races on the Sound and in the Northeast. The race is 238 miles long and, depending on the wind conditions, usually takes 3 days to complete. The boats start off the shore of Stamford, Connecticut, and race eastward on Long Island Sound. Sometime during the night of the first day, the boats leave the Sound. There are 4 exits to choose from. The 2 most popular are referred to as the Gut and the Race. The Gut exit is between Plum Island and Orient Point, Long Island. The Race is just south of Fisher's Island, Connecticut. After leaving the Sound, the fleet must race eastward to Buzzards Bay Light Tower, which lies just west of Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. The boats round the tower and then return westward. Once again, the boats must choose one of 4 entrances back into the Sound. The finish is at Stamford. The winner's name is engraved on the Vineyard Trophy, which is a replica of the U.S. Coast Guard lightship that preceded the Buzzards Bay Light Tower. Through the years, hundreds of skippers have competed to have their names engraved on this trophy. The first Vineyard Race was held in 1932. And with the exception of 2 years during World War II, it has taken place on Labor Day weekend every summer for 50 years. The race has attracted a diverse array of sailing yachts, from large wooden schooners to high-tech racing sloops, steered by sailing personalities ranging from Arthur Knapp to Ted Turner. This competitive ritual has seen many technological design changes, but the strategic choices offered by the course have remained the same for half a century.
Most people look on the Vineyard Race here as the high point of our distance racing season. You have everybody, the Block Island Race is the spring high point, if you will, but I think you always have the Vineyard backing that up, and it is, I guess, 60 miles longer, so it's the premier distance race here on the Sound, and I always looked on it that way.
This is probably the best race in the eastern United States because it is not one race, it's really 3 races. It's a race out of Long Island, a race from Long Island and getting back to Long Island Sound, and then it's a race to the finish line.
I feel like the Vineyard is a typical example of the best of the medium distance offshore races.
Just came back from Hawaii and sailed pretty much all around the world. And the Vineyard Race, because of the race gut situation, going out and coming in, add something to that race that makes it extremely interesting.
This 50th anniversary of it shows you that it's one that's long-lasting, and I think it'll probably go on till long after I'm on the protest committee, up or downstairs.
My introduction to the Vineyard Race came when I was no more than a mid-teenager, probably in the 12 or 14-year-old thing. And have done it on and off ever since. Not consistently, but every so many years. The early years, first one was done with my father on a boat called Chanty Man, a 32-foot catch, and we'll be doing that again this year. There'll actually be 3 generations of us on the boat this year, because my son, who is 14, will join us for the first time in a long-distance race.
I think I've sailed in more sailboat races than anybody alive, or dead. When I first entered, there were only, I don't know, 19 or 20 boats that went in the race.
We tossed out Ted Turner, too, for endeavoring to avoid a mark of the course by turning his engine on. I mean, maybe they can do that in the America's Cup but not here.
Throughout the history of the Vineyard Race, the race committee has witnessed and ruled over many disputed conflicts. At the start of the 1961 race, a boat named Spooky collided with another named Marie. The competitive entanglement was scrutinized by a thoroughly experienced race committee. Carol Reinstrom, serving as an honorary race committee member in 1984, is one of the only remaining sailors who raced in the first race in 1932. The 50th anniversary race in 1984 started on a sunny afternoon with a northwesterly breeze of 15 knots and a slowly diminishing outgoing tide. The fleet of 117 boats was divided into 7 divisions with 3 handicap systems taking into consideration boat size, boat design, and sail area differences. The first and smallest division was comprised of boats with sizes in the low 30-foot range. The favorable conditions allowed the boats to enjoy a downwind start and to have the advantage of an outgoing tide. The divisions were started in half-hour intervals. The second division was comprised of slightly larger boats, mostly in the high 30-foot range. The third division, with boats also in the high 30-foot range, had a good start. The strategies of where to be positioned on the starting line and when to be there are the deciding factors in a good or bad start. The boats must reach their desired location on the line at the exact moment the gun is sounded. The timing of the spinnaker set on a downwind start is critical to the positioning of the boats. If the spinnaker is set too early, the added speed may pull the boat across the starting line before the gun. If set too late, the competition will sail away. The timing is crucial because a boat which crosses the line prematurely must go back and recross to avoid disqualification. By the fourth start, the wind velocity picked up to approximately 20 knots, allowing the boats the advantage of sailing at a good clip into the first night. The actual boat speed is determined by the hull, sail, and rig design and the wind force. If the boat is not sailed properly, the added wind force, which could be turned into speed, is wasted regardless of the design. Trimming a sail well is an art that takes years to master. The sail works as an airfoil in much the same way as an airplane wing, with a high-pressure zone on one side and a low-pressure zone on the other. If this pressure is not balanced correctly in terms of trim, shape, and stiffness, the wing has no lift and the sail has no power. Most of the boats in this race are rigged for racing, meaning that they have tuned their masts and spars for the highest performance obtainable from their particular boat designs. The positioning and tension on the rig affects sail shape, which is another component determining boat speed. Also, these boats have a variety of sails on board which they must choose and change to make the best use of the wind conditions. The sails are designed with different weight, thickness, and shape, using different materials and techniques to provide optimal performance. There are many choices for the skipper and crew. A wrong choice of sails and rig tension might result in a weakened performance. The 6th Division is the second largest in the fleet, with the 7th being the largest. Although the 6th Division started 3 hours after the 1st, the leaders of the 6th should catch the stragglers of the 1st Division sometime in the first night. It is a general rule that larger boats sail faster than smaller ones of the same caliber. The staggered start, therefore, allows for a closer and more exciting race. During the first night, boats are often racing close together, and there is the threat of collision in the darkness. At the finish, the handicap rules take effect so that the larger boats will owe the smaller boats time so that anyone can win regardless of size. More so than size, however, navigational strategies decide which boat will win. The different tidal forces and wind conditions provide several strategies to choose from. Boats may go eastward along the shoreline of either Connecticut or Long Island, or they may decide to remain in the middle of the Sound. The outgoing tide is stronger in the deeper water in the middle of the Sound, but the land may create beneficial wind effects along the shoreline. The seventh and last division is the largest, with some boats in excess of 60 feet. There are now 117 boats in total, headed eastward on the Sound. After crossing the starting line, each skipper and tactician must begin implementing his specific navigational strategy. In this race, according to the tide timetables, the tide will be helping the boats along until about midnight. Then the tide will change, so that the boats that make it to the exit of the Sound before the tide change will have a strong advantage, leaving the remaining boats to fight the current through the relatively narrow exits. Because of the tide and wind conditions of this particular race, the third division is the last division that will have a chance of clearing the exit before the tide change. Boats in that division have already separated into 3 groups, each trying a different strategy to make it to the exit first.
The reason that the Vineyard Race is such a challenge, I believe, and the reason it's so popular is of the challenges, the variety of the challenges that each boat and each crew has to face. You have the conditions of Long Island Sound, you have the exit and entrance back into Long Island Sound, and then you have the racing in the heavier sea conditions and probably the steadier wind conditions in Block Island, Rhode Island Sound. I don't know how many races offer that variety of conditions, but I would guess very few. You know, the Bermuda race, for example, gets a lot of publicity, but it's basically a fetch race in the same kind of conditions over a long distance, just as a comparison.
My overriding concern is to make the boat go fast. The secondary level of concern is whether you sail on the Long Island side or the Connecticut, Rhode Island side as you go out and back. And that really depends what the wind is looking like it's going to be and what the current's going to be. This year we look like we're going to have a cold front coming through on Friday morning, and that means the breeze will be northwest or north in the first part of the race. And I think you'll find all the fast, best boats up on the Connecticut and Rhode Island shore, and they will stay up tight all the way out to the tower, which is a classic northerly kind of strategy. The breeze tends to be fresher close to Connecticut and Rhode Island, and so I think we would expect to do that on Blue Yankee. Then coming back, it should lighten, and eventually the breeze will probably die and the sea breeze may fill in, and I would think we'd end up hanging on the Long Island side on the way back to get the thermal earlier and maybe stronger. But I don't really have any rules of thumb. Some people say that they always go to the Connecticut side or the Long Island side. I tend to look at the weather map and check the current and play it accordingly. This year's pretty easy to read, the first half, because this northerly is probably going to come through. So we'll be up on the Connecticut side, I'm sure.
The one thing about the Vineyard Race that separates it from most of the other races are the tides in the eastern end of the Sound. If you can catch the fair tides in and out of the Sound, it makes a tremendous difference, oftentimes as much as 6 hours. And that's a big influence on the outcome of the race.
You have to push the boat to make it go fast, as you would in a course race, because there may not be a big wind shift or a big change in the conditions. The race is not that long that you can count on some magnificent thing happening if you get behind. You've got to really push the boat and make it go fast, but at the same time there is that opportunity for a wind shift, a new front to come in, or a series of thunderstorms to come by, or just the land to heat up in the day and draw the thermal on shore and have a big wind shift or a change in velocity because of that. And you have to be thinking through those things, and then you overlay on top of that a major consideration of the current, with the tides shifting every 6 hours in direction and every hour or two in real strength. That factor gets overlaid, and that really isn't there in many